Thank you so much. All right. It's amazing to be here. I've had a long relationship with MTP back from the early days of the conference in London. So it's great to be back again. We're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to be talking about careers, but I'm going to take a slightly different angle on it. I'm taking the angle of product leadership careers rather than product management careers, right? And so it's a slightly different angle. For those of you who are individual contributors, this is sort of a peek around the corner to see what's coming, all right, and getting you prepared for that. For those of you who might be sort of mid-career, these are some of the challenges and issues that you're facing right now. And for some of you that are more senior, sort of VP or CPO level, this hopefully will help you coach your own teams and some of the challenges they may be going through. All right, so who is Ken? Let's start off with a bit of context. So I've had an amazing career. I've been a product manager. I love product management. And I've now sort of become a product leader. I started off as a humble product manager at eBay many years ago. Spent 9 years at eBay. I joined just after Marty Kagan left. So for all of you who have read some of his books, like I was trained in the shadow of Marty Kagan, right? And so I could see a lot of his work in how product managers worked at eBay, because Marty was actually the first product director at eBay many years ago. So I've lived in like 6 countries, 6 cities and 5 countries around the world. I've worked with teams all over the place. It's been an amazing journey, and I've really loved it. I've been Chief Product Officer twice. The first time was actually in Asia for a company called Seek Asia. It's an employment marketplace. And then more recently at Spark Networks, which is online dating, relationships marketplace. They're all marketplaces, including eBay. I love them. I love marketplaces. All right, and so the context of where I'm coming from is sort of mid-sized product companies. You're looking at product and tech in general around sort of 200 to 300 people, that sort of size company. I have worked with startups as well. I've done lots of coaching, and I'm actually kind of working on my own side hustle right now, which might hopefully become a startup at some point. All right, so I've learned a lot over many years of doing this, and it hasn't been easy. I've struggled in my career just like you guys are struggling in your careers as well. And so I've been through all of these challenges myself personally, and even despite all that, it has been worth it. It's been really rewarding. And so my more focused sort of title for today is 5 lessons I wish I had learnt earlier. And my objective here is to really help you uncover some blind spots. So just remember that feedback is a gift, sometimes a painful gift. You may disagree, you may reject some of this, slightly contrarian sometimes. But in my experience, the best feedback has always been a little bit painful. And the thing about blind spots is that you can't see them. That's why they're called blind spots, right? And it takes someone else to point them out. And so that's what I'm trying to do today. Remember, it comes from a place of good intent. And so, again, just to set a bit more context, I am not smarter than any of you. I'm just older, okay? And so with age comes a bit of wisdom, I hope. So let's get into it. All right, lesson number 1. Okay, you are not as competent as you think you are. Now, the flip side of this is that actually nobody is as competent as they should be. There's just so much to learn. It's overwhelming. All right? So as an individual contributor, you're spending all of your time just learning the craft. All right? And so my first piece of advice to you is don't learn just how to be a product manager. Also think about why you do the things that you do. Because at some point, you're going to have to explain to someone senior why you do roadmaps this way. Why do we do OKRs? Why do we do discovery? Why do we do A/B tests and experiments? Why do I hate my boss? Now, that's actually a really, it's actually a really legitimate question, because as you progress in your career, if you can figure out why you hate your boss and be able to articulate that, you can learn from that experience and figure out how to be a better leader yourself. Don't make those same mistakes. So as you learn the craft, you need to get to the stage where you can actually start coaching other people, right? And so a good sort of rubric for this is, could I get a job as a product management coach coaching other PMs in another company, right? That would be the ultimate sort of knowledge of the craft. And so that's kind of what I expect from a principal PM, right? So if you're a principal, you should be at that stage where you can coach other people quite confidently. If you're sort of a mid product manager or a senior, you should be working towards that. When you get to that point, you may start to find yourself being promoted into a management or a leadership role. And then everything changes. Everything that you've learned about the craft is no longer the most important thing that you need to learn. So my second piece of advice is optimize your career for learning. All right? For learning. Because the pace that you learn determines how far you can go in your career. All right, so don't optimize for money, don't optimize for status or title or anything like that. Really optimize for learning. And you should be carving out time in your week for learning, specifically for learning, whether that's part of a product management community or whether that's courses or books or YouTube videos, whatever that might be. Right? You need to set a pace for how quickly you are learning everything that you need to know. And so, as I said, everything changes as soon as you move into a management and a leadership role, which brings me to lesson number 2. Get commercial. This is a really difficult one, all right? Building products that customers love is a requirement, but it is not sufficient for your long-term career success as a product leader. All right, it's probably fine for a while. You can definitely have a great job and a great career as a product manager, but if you really want to be a product leader, you have to break out of that at some point. It becomes particularly difficult as soon as you reach director level. That's when the commercial pressure really kicks in, and it is brutal. There's an old saying, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when you're a product manager, every problem looks like it can be fixed by fixing the product. And that's unfortunately just not true. All right? When you become a product leader, you have to think about other dimensions of how you compete as a product and as a company. And so I often observe when I'm coaching people a certain level of kind of idealistic wishful thinking. This sort of naivety in product managers that can really hold them back from being really senior product leaders. And it doesn't serve you well. And I know this because I was exactly like that. I was that idealistic product manager. And so eventually you come to the point where ideology and your idealistic thoughts about how products should be have to capitulate to the pressures of the real world, right? As product managers, we kind of live in a bit of a bubble. And so as soon as you step into a leadership role, that bubble bursts and you have to deal with reality. And so if you really want to become a product leader, you need to learn the rules of the game, right? And it's not about the craft, it's about how we compete as a product and how we compete as a company. And the sooner you learn those rules, the better it is for your career to accelerate. All right, so the second lesson is get commercial. In a practical sense, that means getting close to understanding how your company actually drives revenue and profits, and what is your part in fixing the product so that you can drive the metrics that lead to revenue and profit. All right. That's what commerciality is. Right. And so you need to get used to that. Lesson number 3. Everyone's going to tell you to be more strategic. I had it. I'm sure you guys get this feedback as well. I really struggled with strategy. It was not something that came naturally to me. For a long time, I didn't understand it. When I was at eBay, I would constantly argue with the strategy team. There was a lot of strategy people at eBay. And so, I spent 9 years at eBay. I struggled every single day with the strategy team. And so when I left eBay, I decided to join a strategy consulting firm. I joined BCG Digital Ventures. So it was the sexy bit of BCG, not the boring consulting bit. But I still fought with those guys every single day, right? And I did that because I needed to learn how strategy works, right? I knew there was something that I was missing in the bigger picture that I hadn't come to grips with yet. And as I was saying before, the truth is that products compete, but companies also compete. There are other dimensions of competition that you guys might not be focused on. Product is one of those dimensions of competition, but companies compete for talent. They compete for attention, acquisition, so marketing. They compete on pricing and monetization models. They compete on customer service. And they also compete for capital. And so your CEO and your CFO are focused on that dimension of competition, and that can sometimes impose constraints on what we can do as product managers. As you become more senior in your role, you're going to still be working with peers who are also product managers. This completely changes as soon as you become Chief Product Officer, right? Because your peers are now executives from other functions who don't think the way that you do. They don't have the same product knowledge or experience or understanding of how product works. And so you need to be prepared for that. And your role changes as well. You're no longer thinking about just product. You're thinking about product as part of the whole company, right? So you need to start thinking about that as well. So let's get a little bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of it. What most people think, well, most companies think of as strategy is actually planning, right? So a strategy is not a plan. It is not a roadmap. It's not a list of activities. And it's not a goal either. It's not more revenue. More revenue is not a strategy. Profitability is not a strategy. Superior shareholder returns is not a strategy, right? A strategy is about a thesis that comes from 2 simple questions. Simple questions, but very, very hard to answer. And so those 2 questions are, where do we play? How do we win? All right? And within that structure, at the company level, you're thinking about product strategy. Mostly it's about how do we win? Like what are the objectives and features that we need to build in order to actually win in our product category? But there's a bigger question about where do we play? Should we even be in this business? What the hell is the business that we're in the first place? And so you need to ask that question as well, at the company level and at the product level. Because it's very important. If you're playing in a game, right, but there's no prize, like why the hell are you playing? Like if you can't have an advantage, if you can't win the game, do you even want to start playing? And so that's how I approach strategy. And then within that, there's product strategy. So Andrew covered this morning Gibson-Biddle's model, right? The DHM. How do you delight customers in hard-to-copy ways and that are margin-enhancing, right? And so that's a really nice framing of product strategy, but it needs to sit within a larger strategy for the company. Okay. Advice. This is really hard. You need to start figuring this stuff out now, all right? And so you can do small things to start off with. Ask your leaders, what is the strategy? What is the product strategy? Right? Understand it first. If they don't have a good one, and most companies unfortunately don't, then you've got to go and figure it out. Go work with your leaders. Try and figure out what the real product strategy is. And lastly, don't be afraid to argue with your strategy team. All right? It's really good practice. It's a good thing. All right. Lesson number 4. As you become a product leader, you are no longer involved in the day-to-day decisions of A/B testing and roadmaps or anything like that. That's all sort of 2 levels away from you now. And so as a chief product officer, you're now responsible for the whole organization that gets product to market, to your customers. And when I say organization, I mean product management, but I also mean UX design. Quite often there's a research team, maybe there's a data analytics team, a product analytics team. It also kind of includes engineering as well, right? It's a team sport to get a product to market. And so you have to be looking at all of the systems and processes across the whole product and tech organization so that you can actually execute on the product strategy and get into the market and win, right? And so if you do want to get to CPO level, you need to start figuring out some of this stuff as well. Don't just work with your UX designer, like really understand how they do things, why they do the things they do. How do you leverage the skills and the knowledge and the time that they have to focus just on the customer? That's super important. Similarly, understand the metrics, right? You've got amazing, platforms out there like Pendo, who can actually give you a lot of information about customer behavior and products metrics. So you've got to work with your analytics team to actually be able to do that. And you have to do it because if you don't, you're just not going to be able to execute. And that means you, as a product leader, would have failed. Right? Strategy is easy. Well, actually, strategy is hard. But ideas are easy. Execution is really where it counts. So you have to be working not in the business. You have to be working on the business, right? Improving the systems process. It includes things that you really may not have had a lot of exposure to. So things like how to run a good performance management system, strategy, planning, OKRs, what's your operating model, what are the tools that you're using, things like structure, the structure of your teams, the incentives that you have, and more importantly, it's also about culture and organizational behavior. Right? When it boils down to it, it's all about people. What I've learned as a product leader is that all problems are people problems. The second part of that is that all people problems are leadership problems. And so the responsibility comes to you as a leader to make sure that you have a well-functioning organization. That's something you don't really learn as a PM, right? And so there's a lot of ways that you can start to accumulate some of this knowledge. So Muddy Kagan, I mentioned earlier, he has written a book called Transformed. It's quite focused on still the product, right? But it's a really good starting point. You might go to business school, you might do an MBA. That can be useful. It's a little bit generic, but it can still be useful, especially with some of these topics that are not specific to product, right? They're generalized across all teams and organizations. You might go to a product leadership program. I think MTP actually has one. I'm not sure, right? I think that's still around. I actually contribute to one at INSEAD. So there's a product leadership course there. It's a sort of executive MBA in product leadership. So I'm one of the lecturers there. You might also try and find a product leadership coach, right? That's super useful. Because when you're quite senior in your career, it's kind of lonely. Like you don't have other peers that you can talk to and sort of bounce ideas off. So it's often necessary to go outside of your organization to find people and to be able to have that, really difficult conversations. Sometimes it's all about confidence. In a lot of cases, when I do coaching, it's actually, hey, I'm wanting to do this. This is what my approach is. And a lot of time, it's that's the right approach, and just keep going. And it's more about confidence than anything else. All right, but as I said, it's a lot about human behavior. So become a student of human behavior is the first step on this journey. Start with yourself, understand yourself, your own behaviors, become aware of your own biases, right? You can extend this to customers. It really helps understanding some of this stuff when it comes to customer behavior. Then extend it to your team. Extend it to your team and then grow from there to groups, to domains or tribes, whatever you have in your organization, and eventually to entire organizations. A lot of what I do as a product leader is kind of psychotherapy, to be honest, right? You're influencing people, you're coaching them, you're helping them. It takes a fair bit of understanding of behavior to be effective in your role. Okay, lesson number 5. This is the last one. How am I doing for time? Okay. You are not actually a leader unless people are willing to follow you. You might be a manager, you might have the title, you can boss people around, but you're really not a leader unless people are willing to follow you. And so from director level and upwards, your role again radically changes. You're now a manager of managers, people who are becoming leaders in their own right? And so you need to figure out actually what is leadership? How am I developing as a leader? So you're responsible for everything, all right? So that's a first start. You have to ship a great product. Customers have to love it. You're going to have to drive commercial outcomes. And you're also responsible for strategy and planning. Not only the actual strategy and plan, but the process in which you get there as well. So all the systems, culture, behavior, that's all part of the role. For most of you, if you become a director or upwards, most of what your team is really looking for is just clarity and direction, right? It doesn't have to be a great strategy. Obviously, it helps. But really, the tricky part is in getting everyone to understand the strategy and then to all head in the same direction. So it's a lot about communication. And in order to communicate, you have to communicate clearly, right? That may mean lots of repetition, lots of meetings, but that's just kind of part of the role. So, as I said, you're not a leader unless other people follow you. There's a lot of the mechanics that I went through. But at the end of the day, it's actually all about character. All right? You need to be authentic, good dose of courage, a lot of emotional maturity. And really what I'm getting at here is that in order to build great teams, you have to build trust. All right? You have to build trust with your teams, but you also have to build trust with the senior leadership. That can sometimes mean you need to make compromises. All right. Before I get to this bit. As I said, sometimes you need to make compromises. And you have to build trust, right? And so there will come a moment, or many moments in your career, where you have to stand up to really powerful stakeholders. That can be pretty scary, right? But it's in those moments where your team are watching you, that's where you actually build trust, right? Your team needs to know that if they screw up or make a mistake, you've got their back. You're providing that air cover. And so that's another really important part of being a product leader. It is not an easy job, all right? You're going to screw up, you're going to make mistakes. That's just inevitable. I was a terrible manager when I first started, and I had to learn really hard lessons in order to become a product leader. My last bit of wisdom is from another great leader. This is Theodore Roosevelt. in a speech in 1910. So by this time, he had already left the office as the president. And so it was written over 100 years ago, so apologies for the gender-specific quote here. It's the man in the arena quote. It's a really important speech that I always refer to whenever I screw up. And it gives me perspective so that I can continue to move on as a product leader. So I'm going to read it out to you. It is not the critic who counts. Actually, I'll say that again. It is not the critic who counts. Not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, he at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And so what he's talking about here is that, yes, you're going to make mistakes. And it's easy to be a critic. It's easier to throw stones from the sidelines because you're not in the arena. And so my last words of wisdom here is that you need to be in the arena. I encourage all of you to become product leaders because there's just not enough of it. All right? We need you to become product leaders. You need to be in the arena. It's very easy to criticize until you actually are in the hot seat making those decisions. And so I have a few last thoughts. If you have a bit of ambition, a bit of drive, a small dose of talent, I really want you to think about what it takes to become a product leader and start moving in that direction. Accumulate the knowledge, learn what you need to learn those hard lessons, because it is amazing, right? It's amazing how much impact you can have in the world, how much good you can do for people, not only in your teams, but your customers, And so it's an amazing opportunity to have a huge amount of impact. And so I wish you well on each of your career journeys. Thank you very much.